Welcome back. You're watching the CNBC TV 18 special. We're in conversation with Tata veteran R.K. Krishnakumar. Speaking of resources, and you said you don't anticipate any fundamental shifts in the way that the trusts operate, but I believe that in the last 2 financial years, the Tata Trust have spent about 1,000 crore rupees, and a large majority of that, or at least a substantial part of that, was invested on healthcare programs or programs related to healthcare.
Yes. Yeah.
Can you give us a sense of whether that will continue to be the trend, or would you be looking at sort of diversifying the kind of spending that you're doing across the
No, what we did was Mr. Tata did, when he became more actively involved in this, is to re-look at the thematic areas where the trust should be active. So we look at water, sanitation, nutrition, livelihood building, and so on. And we have done a thorough review of how the trust functions and should now function, the grant-making processes and so on.
What are the key changes?
There's been a significant degree of delegation of powers.
Okay.
So that the grant-making process is shorter, more efficient. Monitoring processes are in place now. Evaluation. For example, I think due diligence of non-government organizations that approach us become tighter. So we make sure that financial controls are in place in organizations to whom we make grants. So the trust is now ready to play a much bigger role in the development process.
Speaking of new areas of opportunity as well as this partnership, I understand that the Trust is working with some US-based organizations to develop some pilot projects when it comes to nutrition-related programs that could be incorporated into the midday meal schemes. Can you throw some light on the kinds of partnerships that you're looking at and what more we can expect, especially in the area of food and nutrition?
The Trust has recently been in touch with the universities and research laboratories outside India, where intellectual hubs exist. We have entered into an agreement with Massachusetts Institute of Technology, which Mr. Tata initiated, Ratan Tata initiated, which really means that a virtual center, a Tata Center for Design and Development, in collaboration with the IIT in Hawaii and a sister virtual organization in Massachusetts. And their research scholars and ideas and so on. They're narrowing down the number of areas, the kind of areas that we should be investing in development of new products, innovation, and some of these.
So will these be products that will address,
some of them
for the lack of a better word, the bottom of the pyramid?
It certainly would be looking at fortification of food in order to address major challenges of malnutrition of severe kinds. It would involve more efficient use of energy devices, particularly solar power, renewable energy, and so on. So I expect the component of technology in the Trust's intellectual capital to significantly increase as a result of these collaborations.
Could any of this eventually become a commercial venture?
The intention is not to make them commercial ventures. The intention is, for example, I personally would expect a lot of intellectual property arising as a result of scientific development work, which MIT would work with us. The intention is not to make them IPR to earn royalties and so on. We'll make it available to anybody who's interested in a product.
Are you also looking at investing in startups that are working in the areas of healthcare, education, sanitation? Is that something that you will be looking at?
When you define startups as commercial enterprises, we would not be very, very enthusiastic about it. The Trust. Maybe
you said not very enthusiastic, so that's not a clear no.
What I'm saying is, I'm being very careful in what I'm saying. Our objective is not really to be linked to a commercial enterprise. The intention has to be something that delivers a product which is good for society.
Speaking of nurturing new institutions, building new institutions, what is on the anvil? The most latest one is, of course, been the cancer hospital that you've set up in Kolkata. You've invested about over 500 crore rupees on that. What more can we expect in terms of institutions or new institutions?
I would expect a very major thrust in areas like water,
Okay.
purification of water. It's a very major challenge emerging. Pure, clean drinking water is just not going to be easily available. So technologies that would, and there are multiple problems. There are reverse osmosis processes, there are different processes for purifying water from bacterial or virus infection. But there are other issues of like arsenic in water. They're much more complex. And to find a magic bullet to deal with all of them would need a great deal of investment and technology. So I wouldn't be surprised if, as a result of the interest and investments that the Tata Trust are taking in water as an area, some institution could very well be visualized as to specialize and funnel in everything that we can possibly do to make water a healthier product.
What is the big challenge that you're facing today, both in terms of policy or policy intervention that you would like to see from the government, in just being able to spend the money that the trust is spending, in being able to forge the sort of partnerships that the trust hopes to forge? What is the biggest challenge that you face today?
I think we are facing the challenge of navigating through various regulatory barriers that are historical legacies. Countries like Sri Lanka, countries like Pakistan, Bangladesh, they have made it possible for fortification, various changes in the delivery of specialized food items. But in India, we have a whole series of restrictions. Some of them are state-based, some of them are central government-based, which is not contemporary.
Is the fundamental problem really the trust deficit?
I don't think it's a trust deficit. I think it's just pure ignorance. Why wouldn't we look at what other countries are doing in terms of fortification of food items, and then looking at revising or reviewing the kind of regulatory infrastructure that there is? That's not happening, and that's a very big obstacle for us.
The Prime Minister has announced several missions: Swachh Bharat, Scale India, Digital India, so on and so forth. And there's been an outreach to corporate India to try and invest or at least partner with the government for some of these initiatives. Do you believe that that ought to be the right way, that ought to be the direction that we should take? Because in some quarters it almost seems to be that the government is abdicating its responsibility, and none of this then becomes at the end really measurable, and it falls between the government stool and the corporate sector stool.
We shouldn't be making a division between government and corporate sector. These are compounded problems for the nation, and each sector, each part has a role to play. Government has a role to play, private sector has a role to play, and I wouldn't say there's an abdication of responsibility. I think it's strengthening the national movement to address some of the central challenges that we face.
So since you have reviewed the functioning of the trust and put new processes in place in how the trusts go about doing their business, is there a 5-year measurable goal, a 5-year agenda that you hope to achieve in 2015? Where would you like to see the trusts and what they do and the objectives that they achieve in the next 5 years?
One of the most important changes that the trusts have incorporated is to do a before and after exercise in making a grant. The intention now is to do some baseline studies before we embark on a development program. Child health, number of children going to school, maternal health issues, parameters that we can measure. And we have often worked with the Tata Institute of Social Sciences to go out there and do the study. We should be able to measure what is the return that we're getting, what is the outcome.
Sure. And what would you say would be the biggest difference that you hope to achieve over the next 5 years?
I think we would certainly be able to make fundamental differences in some of these key areas because of our very firm belief that technology, advances in science, will be harnessed for these purposes more strongly. The key to some of the problems and challenges would lie in development of technology, innovation in technology. So I would expect to see a lot of that with the Tata Trust coming in, and therefore the availability, the flow of products and services that would improve, and then convert it into projects in the field.
Mr. Krishnakumar, it's been a pleasure speaking with you. We wish you the very best of luck with the Tata Trust. Thank you very much for speaking to us on CNBC TV 18. On that note, it's time for us to wrap up the CNBC TV 18 special. From all of us here, goodbye. Many thanks for watching.